The issue here is that Show and Tell doesn't necessarily lead into a kill. It's got a lot of the same problems when you're playing against Knight of Reliquary decks where, you know, you Show and Tell, they put something in, they go get a Caracas. Here, it's a lot of the same elements, except Tom might just kill you. If you put a Show and Tell in, he goes and gets Blood Agent. Then he might just kill you on the untap. So there's some big risk here for Show and Tell. Jared would prefer to win the game through sneak attack, but that might be a little too slow for what Tom's doing.
You see here some numbers up there. Tom is the overall 3 seed, which is why he is on the play. Jared was the 6th seed. They also have rankings. They're both in the top 5 players in the Player of the Year race right now.
So this match has a lot of implications for Jared here. Of course, he would like to win the Invitational, but he's also looking to potentially snag either an at-large bid at the end of the year, and he's in contention right now for the Season 4 point invite as well. So the further Jared gets, not only money in this tournament, not only the opportunity to win the Invitational, but even if he falls a little bit short, it matters a lot for Season 4 and the end of the year.
All right, a turn 1 Noble Hierarch for Tom Ross. It's one of his best turn 1s, but Jared may just one-up him on speed here. Ancient Tomb and double Lotus Petal on his turn 1. Are we seeing a turn 1 kill here? He's going to go for Show and Tell on turn 1. And this is something that Tom has very little interaction with. I mean, this Show and Tell's daze proof even.
And there's 3 copies of Force of Will in Tom's deck, and he does appear to have one in hand.
Yeah, he has the Force of Will, and he's going to have to do that. Force of Will pitching Jataxian Probe. And how interesting here, and I want to point out this heads-up play for Tom. Jataxian Probe, I believe, was his only... Well, he had Jataxian Probe and Ponder, but he didn't probe there that turn. He kept it in his hand so that he could pitch it to Force of Will.
Yeah, heads-up stuff. And that's not an intuitive play by any stretch.
No, Jataxian Probe, especially in a combo mirror, I oftentimes want to know just how fast I have to be. And we'll see that now. Jared just had it, almost had it all. He has another Lotus Petal, another land, Force of Will, and Gristlebrand.
So this is a hand that's capable of reassembling pretty quickly, but for the time being, Jared has nothing going on, and Tom has free reign.
Yeah, I mean, Jared, I think there was hoping just to, I mean, if Tom didn't have Force of Will, and it had to be Force of Will, not just Daze, Jared was going to just steal that game right off the bat.
Not a bad keep by Jared, of course, and Tom, especially with the 3 copies of Force of Will in his deck. A good risk-reward analysis there by Jared, but Tom had the answer ready.
Question is, yeah, how fast can Tom kill? His hand did not have much of his own combo in it. On the top of his deck, he's going to go, he sees Daze, which he takes. Going to make a Glistener Elf and an Inkmoth Nexus. So there are 2 Infectors on the board now. It looks like he can start punching for 2 Infect a turn starting next turn, but that's still a 5-turn clock. Jared has a lot of time to reload.
That is a lot of time. Though Jared does have a lot of below average draws in his deck from this point. Cards that are not going to help him much. Lands, redundant fatties, counter spells.
All right, he's going to play out that second Lotus Petal now that Tom knows about it. The reason to hang on to it would be in case he has a Brainstorm. He's going to now cast Jataxian Probe.
And Tom here also very defense light.
Yeah, draws Volcanic Island. So you see now he has a Volcanic Island, a Force of Will, and a Gristlebrand. He actually has enough mana to cast that Force of Will if he needs to. Though as we know, there is a Daze waiting in Tom's hand. Tom will start his turn then on a Brainstorm. How fast can he kill he's going to be looking for pump spells, things that just get the job done real quickly. Alternatively, some Dazes are things he can work with as well. If he can just keep Jared indefinitely off the combo, maybe this 5-turn swing will be enough.
It's tough to get much value out of a Daze at this point because Jared has enough mana to even pay for sneak attack if it gets to that point.
Yeah, it looks like Tom's going to put some of those back with a Brainstorm, then crack a fetch land.
The incentive to keep a Daze is even if Jared plays sneak attack with 5 mana, you can Daze and that's a 1-turn reprieve.
Exactly, because he wouldn't have the red mana source to throw Gristlebrand in. As we know, the Volcanic Island in his hand does provide that 6th mana to play through Daze. Looks like Tom's kept one of his Dazes. A Daze and a Brainstorm was his hand.
Yeah, he had the option of taking 0, 1, or 2 Dazes off of that Brainstorm. Elected to keep 1.
Yeah, certainly I think he'd have to keep the Brainstorm off it. We'll see if he fires it off right away or if he waits. I'm not sure how much value he'll get off an immediate Brainstorm.
Yeah, he could look for additional help this turn, although mana is unlikely to be a bottleneck, so he can just pass, untap, Brainstorm, and look for something big.
All right, Glistener Elf exalts in for 2, and Tom is on the board. Turn 1 down. Jared's at 2 poison. If Tom can put together 4 more turns, he'll have the game. Alternatively, any pump spell will shave 2 of those turns off.
And you see the Tom Ross Infect token there on the screen. Part of Tom's prize for winning the Invitational just a few months ago.
And it's going to be a Brainstorm for Tom. He finds another Noble Hierarch and a fistful of lands. Fortunately for him, one of them is a fetch land, so this is as good enough as for a Brainstorm. And if he plays the Noble Hierarch right now, that'll move the Glistener Elf from being a 2-power to a 3 when it swings. It takes a turn off Jared's clock.
And it means that any pump spell Tom finds the following turn is lethal.
Exactly. See him put 2 back. There's the Noble Hierarch. Glistener Elf puts Jared to 5 poison. Tom plays a fetch land, so he's going to get to dig anew, but he doesn't have any cantrips left. And here we go. The thing is that a pump spell possibly this could even put Jared dead even if he gets the Gristlebrand into play. Because both of Tom's creatures would be lethal here with a pump spell.
One of the nice things about dealing infect damage as opposed to trying to kill someone conventionally, lifelink no longer an issue.
Lifelink's not an issue. There are some drawbacks. For example, Jared can tap that Ancient Tomb with impunity in this matchup.
Gitaxian Probe.
Sure.
Dismember. We've seen it all.
Yeah. He's just... The 5 damage he's taking right now, that's all him. We'll see. Did he find a show and tell? What did he find? It was a blue card. We'll see what it is. It's Brainstorm. Pretty good draw here. See if he can find a combo piece. It is Scalding Tarn, Gitaxian Probe, and another Brainstorm. He has some redraws.
Yeah, now with that Scalding Tarn in play, he gets and another Brainstorm that he's found here. He gets a lot of looks at it. The issue here is it may have to be this turn or bust, depending on what is in Tom's hand. Jared cannot afford to be, waiting for the ideal spot, trying to set up the ideal hand. He needs to go now.
Well, he knows it's a 2-turn clock on the board, and he suspects that it could be a 1-turn clock.
Now, he does have the option of trying to keep Force of Will as a way to defend himself from the kill here, but it's not clear that he can keep Force of Will and a blue card and still search for the pieces that he needs.
Right, I imagine we're going to see him crack this fetch land and then burn some more cantrips.
And you can see he's throwing caution to the wind a little bit here. He's gotten rid of the Force of Will. He's keeping Brainstorm and Gitaxian Probe, which I like here. He doesn't really have the luxury of leaving a Force of Will and a blue card left over in his hand. He's just got to go now, even though he's risking potential death next turn if he misses off of these cantrips.
All right, fetches for another Volcanic Island. So remember, he does have Probe and Brainstorm left, so he can go 4 cards deep, looking for a Show and Tell or a Sneak Attack. And shuffle is presented. We're going to see where he goes here. All right. He gets to see whether or not there's a pump spell, Gitaxian Probe. There is not one, and he draws Emrakul. If he finds Sneak Attack, it's now lethal. Plays Brainstorm. Island, Gristlebrand, and Misty Rainforest, no help. He's going to take at least 3. He's out of cantrips. He can crack another fetch land and hope to top deck on that last turn.
Yep.
That's what he's down to.
But just a lot of redundant values. Yeah, he already had played a land that turn, so he's locked, and he knows he's locked.
All right, he can't even crack a fetch land,
Yeah.
so he's going to die in 2 turns. Nothing to be done about it. Game 1 goes over to Tom Ross.
Those were some harrowing turns there for Tom, but the Sneak and Show deck at that spot does have a lot of misses. Jared just found nothing but cantrips that found him nothing but lands, counterspells, and big stuff. No Sneak Attack, no Show and Tell to finish off the game, and Tom is quickly up 1.
All right. Well, as our top 8 is underway, we're going to bring you back into the booth here as the players figure out their sideboarding plans Matthias Hunt and Patrick Sullivan bringing you the top 8 here of the Invitational. And this is that kind of a grudge match between Tom Ross and Jared Boettcher. But if you're watching us, remember, there's a lot of free Star City Games Premium that we're giving away today. So I'm going to explain the rules of the contest. If you guys are just starting for the top 8, then you can throw them a question, and we will be giving away some Star City Games Premium. So how it works, Patrick is going to ask you a question. And if you are following us on Twitter, feel free to shoot an answer. If you believe you know the answer to the trivia question, make sure you include the hashtag SCG Premium on that answer. And when we conclude all of the top 8 matches, all 4 of them, one of the correct answers will randomly receive 3 months of Star City Games Premium. So let's fire one off.
So Tom Ross's Infect deck, there's a variety of Infect creatures, naturally, Glistener Elf, and Blighted Agent. Viridian Corruptor as well. There's also a land that does a lot of the heavy lifting, a land that can deal some Infect damage as well. Can you name that land?
All right, if you believe you know the answer, make sure you include the hashtag SCG Premium on your answer, and stay tuned later on, and we'll announce the winner of the SCG Premium. But, all right, going back to the match, right there, we saw Jared try to be the faster combo deck, and really went all in on a fast play. Tom was able to disrupt it, and Jared could never recover. Going to the sideboard, how does this change? Let's start with Jared's deck.
Well, Jared has some good options here. He has a Shattering Spree, 3 copies of Pyroclasm, 2 copies of Through the Breach, 2 Swan Song, 2 Echoing Truth, 3 copies of Blood Moon, 2 copies of Grafdigger's Cage. I like the Swan Songs a lot in this matchup as either forcing through his own action or defending against Tom's. 3 copies of Pyroclasm. I mean, you just look at this creature base, 4 Blighted Agent, 4 Glistener Elf, 4 Noble Hierarch, a Viridian Corruptor, and a copy of Dryad Arbor. All those get swept away, so that's easy to bring in.
Yeah.
I think the real secret star of this matchup may be Blood Moon. It's very hard for Tom to function against that card, both in terms of having colored mana, and Inkmoth Nexus is a very valuable weapon for him in the matchup as well. So I think you're going to see a lot of sideboarding on Jared's side. The Shattering Spree may come in as well as another answer to a Nexus, but I think you're definitely going to see the Pyroclasms, the Swan Songs, and the Blood Moons.
Yeah, I like what you said about Swan Song here, because a lot of times when you're playing against a deck that's attacking you, the Swan Song is kind of this necessary evil where, yeah, it's a 1-mana counterspell, it's really good, but you're giving your opponent a 2/2, which isn't trivial. But against the Infect deck, giving your opponent a 2/2 flyer really doesn't matter.
It's free. It's very close to free. Now, there are weird scenarios that come up where between Noble Hierarch and creatures, the Infect deck, and pump spells, the Infect deck can kill with conventional damage, but that's definitely the backup plan and not the primary plan. So Swan Song very well suited for this kind of game.
All right, we saw before, Tom Ross's Infect deck does have a shell of some disruption in it. He does have Days End Forcible in the main, and they certainly helped him take game 1. Let's look at the other cards in his sideboard, though. He has, a full 11 different cards available to him. Do you think he becomes more controlling here with cards like Spell Pierce, Hydroblast, and, possibly in the last Force of Will?
I think he can turn into some sort of, fish counter sliver sort of strategy here, where he can play 1 threat and protect it long enough. Almost a Delver strategy here with still his combo element. I think the Force of Will, the Hydroblast that fends off, Sneak Attack, which is pretty dangerous for him, the Spell Pierce, those are all reasonable to bring in. I think the 1 Caracas is awesome in this matchup. Tom does have 1 copy of Crop Rotation in his deck to go search for it. That does a lot of work against Gristlebrand and Emrakul, of course. And I think the additional counter spells do some lifting here as well.
All right, 1 card I want to mention quickly here is Piracy Charm. It can make a player discard a card at instant speed. Not ideal, but sometimes, do you think can he break up Jared's combo that way?
It's very unlikely. Sneak and Show it's not a deck like Storm. It's not a deck that needs all of its pieces or a lot of its pieces to go off. Jared's just trying to slap A and B together. And there will be some percentage of draws where discarding a card matters a lot, but I think more often than not, he's going to have leftover tools in his hand if he's able to do his thing.
Yeah, other modes on Piracy Charm, that would be the one that he would want in this matchup. And I think I agree. I would be surprised to see him boarded in. But this Crop Rotation into Caracas, that's some pretty big game in this matchup, and something I wouldn't typically expect out of a blue-green deck.
Yeah.
All right, as these players move to game 2, we have some updates from other parts of the bracket. Devin O'Donnell, he's our Bug Delver player. He is up a game on William Cruz, 1-0. Alex Finchler as well took game 1 off Reed Duke, so our Punishing Jund player takes the first game off Reed's Blue-White Miracles deck.
Yeah, the matchup is already, I think, a little rough for Reed, and his main deck, Red Blaster, doing no help there as well.
Yeah, and remember, in these best of fives, game one can be a little different than the rest of the games. You're playing a whole slew of post-board games as opposed to just one game one.
And in this matchup, I think that helps Jared a lot because he's bringing a lot more to the table in the post-board games than Tom is.
All right, so we are underway. Jared starts with a turn one ponder. Remember, I think at the beginning of the game, both players are just trying to combo quickly rather than set up a defense.
Yeah.
So he gets an offense out first. Tom wants some information. He's going to see how fast does he need to be. Jared has another ponder. He has lands 2 and 3. He has show and tell plus Emrakul. It's a pretty good combination. And he has a second real huge hit at 3, and that's Blood Moon.
So this is a hypothetical turn 2 hand from Jared, depending on what happens with that ponder, but most likely a turn 3 hand, which is not that fast for this matchup.
We'll see what Tom can do. It looks like he does have access to Glistener Elf. He is boarded in the Sylvan Library, and he does have a Vines of Vastwood in his hand, so he has an Infector and some Pump. Whether or not he can make it 10 points of Infect, well, we'd have to see whether the other cards are willing to cooperate.
I would assume this matchup was very, very fast for Sylvan Library.
Yeah, I'm surprised. What that tells me is that I think Tom is comfortable getting into a bit of a control war here. Both these decks, because their combo doesn't take up the whole deck, do have leeway to run some counter spells.
Yep.
And Tom's going to lead off on Noble Hierarch. Which is one of the things I think is really, I've said before, is kind of neat about the Infect deck is you see Tom with the option between Glistener Elf and Noble Hierarch on turn 1. Despite the fact that it's an Infect combo deck, Noble Hierarch is usually the preferred 1-drop.
Well, it makes everything so much easier going forward.
Yeah, exactly.
Tom would like to chain together multiple spells in a turn, and that requires as much mana as possible, so he gives up 1 point of Infect potentially, but you can look at his hand. It's got a Blighted Agent, and it's got Vines of Vastwood, so the library, he needs more mana.
Jared manipulating here with a pre-ponder fetch land on turn 2. Remember, from his first ponder, he looked at 3 cards, drew 1 off the ponder, and then drew 1 this turn, so he still knew the top card. Evidently, as it would likely to be, something he didn't want. He wanted to just have a fresh deck before he casts ponder on it, and he's going to do that now. And looks like there's a Gristlebrand and an Island in there. Not sure about the third card. Those don't seem to be pieces he needs right now.
He already has a way to win the game with his show and tell. He has an Emrakul.
Right, so he's looking then for cards like, I would think, Spell Pierce, possibly Force of Will, something that can help save him if Tom gets a really, really fast next turn.
Even another show and tell or another sneak attack, something in case that something goes wrong with the first copy of show and tell.
Notice there, Tom fetched for basic Forest because after seeing the Blood Moon in Jared's deck. Is the Blood Moon even a threat then? Between a Noble Hierarch and a basic Forest, I would think Blood Moon doesn't really do anything.
Yeah, Tom can function mana-wise. It doesn't matter if he draws a Nexus and some other things like Karakas, Petal Haven, those get shut off, but from a colored mana perspective, Tom's fine.
Tom draws a Glistener Elf. I believe he has a Vines and an Invigorate. So once he gets an Infector down, this isn't gonna be, it's gonna be pretty quick.
Yeah,
that's 10 points if you add in the Noble Hierarch.
Yeah.
But he will start on a Brainstorm, and Jared holds him up on the play, suggesting he's found some sort of interaction. Tom draws Blighted Agent and 2 lands. One of them is an Ink Moth.
Well, I think we're gonna find out very quickly if Jared's found a piece of interaction.
Yeah. Is Ink Moth too slow for this matchup?
It is not the ideal threat for Tom. There's a lot of matchups where it's his best card. This is not one of those matchups. But I think post-board, when Jared is bringing Pyroclasm to the table, it's still something that can serve a role.
Yeah. I was going to say, normally I think of Ink Moth as the best Infect creature, out of the 3 that people play. But here, I'm not sure how attached to it Tom really is.
No, I don't think it's a primary game plan at all.
Yeah. It's harder to pump because it's just that's a lot of your mana.
There's many matchups in Legacy, particularly the Abrupt Decay matchups where Inkmoth is your best card.
Yeah, if they're leaving up a kill spell, it doesn't matter if it's an Inkmoth Nexus.
But here, I'm sure Glistener Elf and perhaps Blighted Agent are the threats he would like to have.
We do see 8 points of pump in Tom's hand. As mentioned before, he has 2 blighted, right now when designing his cards, he has 2 blighted agents, Invigorate, a Vines of Vastwood, a Sylvan Library, a Tropical Island, and an Ink Moth. He's gonna play Ink Moth and actually go for Sylvan Library here. So despite, I am interested. Okay, so despite having 8 points of pump in his hand and a Noble Hierarch on the board, he's gonna go play Sylvan Library.
Well, if he has a land, this is still...
It's
so
still
imagine,
lethal.
imagine he casts a Glistener Elf here. Jared untaps and plays Pyroclasm. Now there's a fight. It's very unlikely Jared chooses to Pyroclasm away this board, and it's still lethal next turn if Tom has a land to play.
And there was a Tropical Island in that Brainstorm, so Tom does have a land to play. So he's still planning to activate Ink Moth with his last 2 mana, Vines it, Invigorate it, swing for 10.
He gets 2 different paths here. If Jared plays Blood Moon, he can say, okay, fine, untap, play another Infector, or fight over the Blood Moon if he wants to. And if Jared has Pyroclasm, he's fine as well.
All right. There is some collateral damage with that Blood Moon. Jared is Stone Raining himself here. His City of Traders is now turned into an island, so it only taps for 1. There's an upside that he doesn't have to sacrifice it anymore.
Yeah. But this all assumes that the game is going on for like a turn or 2, which may not be the case.
Tom had the option to force pitching Blighted Agent there and did not, which makes me think he's fine playing an Infect creature and then setting up for next turn. A lot of strong patience on the side. I feel a lot of players with a 10-point swing next turn would want to snap force whatever Jared played.
Yeah, there's no rush on Tom's side.
Blighted Agent off of Noble Hierarch. Times there, tapping Misty Rainforest for red mana as it's now a mountain.
And Blighted Agent is nice here too because it means that even if Jared has Show and Tell, that doesn't necessarily matter. If it's Emrakul, it definitely doesn't matter.
Right. If it's Gristlebrand,
well, then Jared has
then
redraws,
Jared has
and,
redraws.
And so forth. But
Blood Moon turning everything into a mountain as you see it there on your left. Well, nearly everything. Each player has 1 non-mountain land in play. It looks like Jared's going to go for a Show and Tell.
I think this might be Show and Tell with the intent of putting in Sneak Attack.
And
because Show and Telling in either of his creatures in the spot,
doesn't work.
he may still die.
Yeah, and Tom does have Force and Blighted Agent. Force pitching blue card takes care of the Show and Tell. That was one that he could have played last turn, but he was waiting for the Show and Tell. And he's going to be rewarded for his patience. As we know, he has the kill right in his hand right now.
And Jared making a good show of it here by, thinking for a while, then saying go. I don't think Tom's going to play around Force of Will here. I think he thinks Jared would have fought back if that was going on.
It's not even that, well, Tom, yeah. I was going to say, it's not even that bad. Tom's going to swing with Blighted Agent and Invigorate. And he's going to Invigorate again. So he actually didn't have to Vines. He got to leave up Spell Pierce as he double Invigorated. Tom had the combo down through any interaction, and he knew it.
Man, Jared's got to shake this off. I mean, I understand, this has been a rough start or whatever, but he looks a little flummoxed right now.
Jared keeping a hand that's not terrible there. I mean, it has the combo. It's just in that situation, the combo was not good enough.
Well, there's Tom's coming from a variety of angles in that game. The way that he sequenced also kind of induced Jared to cast that Blood Moon. Not even clear how good that Blood Moon was because Jared may have been able to chain together multiple spells with the City of Traders in play, and even if not, it was a turn that Jared kind of took off that Tom was totally happy with.
Yeah, and what's really showing to me right now is that Jared's combo pieces seem pretty dead here. The Gristlebrand in his hand, for example, isn't really a card. It lets him win, but it doesn't do anything else. Whereas Tom's cards that he's winning with, things like a land, Inkmoth Nexus, or Noble Hierarch, those are letting him get a leg up in the counter war. So Tom's able to utilize all his cards, I think, a little bit better than Jared is right now.
There is a certain, leanness and efficiency to what Tom is doing. Also, another problem here is Jared cannot be, too confident that show and tell is a win. If he's showing tell in Gristlebrand, maybe he can draw enough Force of Will to stop whatever Tom's doing on the way back. Show and tell into Emrakul is, I would say, unlikely to win the game.
Right.
Tom gets to untap. He gets to, if he has a Blighted Agent, Jared's very likely to die on the way back.
This is something that you often see. There are a few Legacy matchups that work this way. For example, back when Elves used to play Priest to Titania, you could put an Emrakul into play, they'd put a Priest in, and then they'd untap and kill you. Infect can put Blighted Agent into play, untap and kill you. And there are a few decks that work this way, so you have to be careful with show and tell. Some updates. Devin O'Donnell and William Cruz, this is your Bug Delver matchup versus 4-color Delver. It is 1-1, so they're going to a game 3 and a game 4, maybe the full 5. Also in our bracket, all the game 1s have finished. Shihui Yim, he's playing against Peter Ingram, trying to deal Peter his first and, well, only Legacy loss. Shihui has taken the game 1, his Blue-White Miracles deck, up a game right now against Bug Delver.
So now Jared is going to have to break serve twice to take this match. He gets to be on the play here, assuming that he wins. He will be on the draw for a 4th and theoretical 5th game.
What makes Sneak and Show to me so powerful in Legacy is when you're playing against decks that don't have the right kind of interaction, you just kill them right away. You Lotus Petal out a sneak attack, you throw an Emrakul at them, and the game's over. Infect has this problem, that cards like Swords to Plowshares can stop you. Lightning Bolt can stop you, though that one only sometimes gets you. But in this matchup, that doesn't really matter, as Tom does have the cards needed to interact.
Yeah, he can fight, and that's a very true point. Sneak and Show cares about very few cards, but cares about them quite a bit. Tom's deck kind of cares about everything. I mean, creature removal, blockers, those effects do matter, but he's not going to be shut down by any one particular card.
Even in Modern, Infect is kind of this combo killer deck. It's a combo deck that's very good against other combo decks. Combo decks tend to not play removal, and when you don't play removal, Infect is a very fast and pretty robust combo deck. Like, its weakness is that most fair decks can interact with it, but in combo mirrors, say in Modern, if you play Scape Shift against Infect, Infect can hardly lose.
Yeah, it's a very challenging matchup.
I would imagine a lot of the slower decks in Legacy having a real hard time with this matchup. The slower combo decks, your high tides of the format probably are equally ill-equipped to deal with Infect. And we're underway. Jared starts with the Ponder, and Tom gains his mana advantage again with a turn 1 Noble Hierarch.
I'm curious to see if Jared considers this to be Pyroclasm worthy on its own. He does have a Blood Moon in hand, so there is an argument for just trying to chain Pyroclasm into Blood Moon. Hope that you shut down Tom's mana.
Yeah, Tom did, unfortunately for Jared, just have Basic Forest to get the Glistener Elf. In Tom's list, there is 1 Basic Forest, so
perfect.
Yeah.
It's the right number because he's drawn it. So
he fetched for it last game because he probed, saw the Blood Moon, and decided it was a good time for Forest. This game, he just played it.
And Tom has another. I think that he has another turn 3 kill with Force and Pierce in hand.
I mean, Noble Hierarch into Glistener Elf and Ink Moth. Jared has Pyroclasm Pierce here. So if he goes for Pyroclasm and fights a war, are you saying that Tom can double counterspell, win the war, untap, and kill him?
I think so. We're going to find out.
That's pretty gross. Okay, Jared's going for the Pyroclasm. And when Tom has hands like this, there's nothing Jared can do.
He can try to be faster, but his deck, there's way more moving parts, and Tom asking for how many cards in his hand.
Tom actually doesn't have the blue card to Pierce and Force. Pierce is his only blue card to go with Force of Will, so he can only fight a single counterspell war, not a double.
Now Jared can Pierce back. Tom has the option here of forcing, leaving up his 2 mana, or trying to Pierce.
I imagine you'd Pierce. Force pitching Pierce seems
Not if he's trying to kill him next turn. I mean,
All right, now you're right. Not if he's trying to kill him immediately. He's going to pierce the Pyroclasm. Well, Jared's going to pierce back. Tom's still not in that bad of a spot. He's got and gets to keep an Ink Moth around.
he also gets to invigorate something.
Yeah, he can save something with the Invigorate. That'll actually be interesting. Is it worth saving something with the Invigorate, or are you just saving it to go to the Dome? It's like an 8-point Lava Spike, right?
The problem is that the other card in his hand is Vines, and that card's going to be really hard to cast if you're activating Nexus without that much mana in play.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. He uses Invigorate to save Noble Hierarch, and there's the Daze this turn, which he drew. Remember, he actually doesn't have the Island for Daze, so Daze is kind of a weak card at the moment. But he will put Jared up to 2 poison and play a Glistener Elf.
So now Blood Moon doesn't really matter very much.
If Jared has another Pyroclasm to go with the Blood Moon, or Jared's just going to try to go for winner, he has Show and Tell. Tom with a real awkward Daze in his hand. Well, it's just a blue card. It pitches to Force of Will. Tom goes 19. Can Jared fight the Counter War again? No, he cannot. You see at the top of his hand the Gristlebrand that was hoping to enter the battlefield that turn.
I believe Tom has drawn a Nature's Claim this turn.
He's going to swing and Vines his Glistener Elf. That puts Jared up to 8 poison. Jared's going to have to win here.
And he can't win with Blood Moon.
Can't win with Blood Moon. There you go. 3 games to 0. Tom Ross cruises through the top 8, sweeping past Jared Boettcher. And once again, Jared finds that Tom is just a tough matchup for him.
Yeah, Jared's draws were pretty good. I think the matchup is pretty good for him overall. But Tom's draws were just excellent. I mean, turn 1 Mana Accelerant. I believe he had Force of Will all 3 games, needed it all 3 games. And I mean, this was a 3-game match. Look at that clock. We are under 32 minutes. That is incredibly fast for a Legacy 3-game set.
Yeah, so update. Tom Ross moves on to the semifinals. Can he win back-to-back invitationals? Remember, this is kind of reminiscent of the last top 8 of an invitational Tom was in, where he kept winning 3-0 with, only 20-some or 30-some minutes into the match.
That was with his standard deck, too. The pre-Goblin Rebel Master boss slide deck that was very extreme. I mean, not even Mutabolts in the main deck. I believe 17 or 18 mountains total. And he saw through that elimination rounds, going 9-1. Had the tournament over by, I don't know what the time was, but it was not that much longer after the elimination round started. And off to a good start to repeat that performance right now.
Yeah. Congratulations to Jared Boettcher, his 3rd consecutive invitational top 8. Will put him in a great spot points-wise to still make the Players' Championship. But for this weekend, will be the last match for Boettcher.